I'm going to read from Matthew's Gospel. I'm going to read from verse 21. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, do not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with his brother will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to his brother, Raca, is answerable to the Sanhedrin. But anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Now listen to verse 23 and 24. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar, and there remember that your brother has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to your brother, then come and offer your gift. I've been reading the gospel for years. And you'd think by this time, I would have gotten a good handle on it. But the truth is that more as much as any time in the past, there are things that are being impressed upon me that have not been impressed upon me as seriously and as heavily as they are in these days. This is one of those passages. And during Jesus' day, people would travel long distances to the temple, to make their sacrifices. And just for a moment or two, imagine that you're one of those travelers and you've taken leave of your responsibilities at home and you've made arrangements and preparations for the journey and you've booked a place to stay for you and your family or whoever's accompanying you. And then when you arrive at the temple, you wait in line to buy an approved animal. You've already converted your currency through the infamous money changers. And then after all that, you get in line for the services of a priest because you need him to make the sacrifice in accordance with the laws of Moses. And it's likely that there are dozens, if not hundreds, of other people who are waiting for the same help. And then at last, a priest calls you over to the altar with your offering. And as he begins the sacrificial rituals, something pops into your mind that you haven't thought about for weeks, perhaps months, possibly even years. And you remember that someone has something against you. According to Jesus, what should you do in that moment? Don't shout it out. Just think about it pensively for a moment or two. Lord, you can't be serious. Friends, I've discovered something over the years of faith that sometimes can be very hard. Obeying God can be very inconvenient. And he can require it at the most inconvenient of times. And in my human thinking, I would likely think, Stuart, you've come this far, just go on ahead and offer the sacrifice and then go and sort things out with the offended person. I suppose you could consider that. It may even be the first thought into your head as well. But as in many areas of life where human instincts point in one pragmatic direction, Jesus makes us go a different way. And the pursuit of being right with others, at least as far as it depends on us, is what the Bible calls the pursuit of a clear conscience. And I cannot overemphasize the health benefits of a clear conscience. In the same way, I couldn't overemphasize the disabilities that come to one's health because of a bad conscience. The Apostle Paul mentioned it frequently, and throughout the Scriptures we see examples of those who had to make amends for their sins. They had to offer restitution for their wrongdoing, and they had to give public confession to something. Now, we're sitting here in the 21st century in this little room. Is that a realistic goal, really? Or is it just a more preacher hyperbole? Is it possible for our conscience to be entirely clear? Is that a possibility? At least clear as far as we know, as much as it's in our power to know. Paul certainly aspired to that standard. Because when he was writing in Acts, or when Luke was writing and recording Paul in his book of Acts, in chapter 24, verse 16, here's what he says: I always take pains. I always go to great lengths to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. That's scary. Yet what would it really take for us to get to that place? Or what would it take for us even to begin that journey? Think about it. Promises made to children still not kept. Hurtful words spoken to your spouse. Items stolen from employers. Cheating, dishonesty, lies, slander. The list goes on and on. We've all been there. We've all done that. There could be a whole host of things that need to be accounted for. And the older I get, the more I appreciate the need of a clear conscience. Situations where our debt to justice is still outstanding, very troubling. And if we're going to sort through it all, we're leaving our gift at the altar, and we're working toward restitution and reconciliation. Now, where should we begin? I don't know where you would begin, but I've thought about this over and over again for an awfully long time, and I have a simple process that I'm going to present to you because I've found it helpful. Number one, simple. Confess your sin to God and repent. A process like this always starts with God, for the simple reason that it's ultimately against Him that we sin. When we sin against other people, ultimately it's a sin against God. And He knows the depths of our hearts even better than we do. And the psalmist says in the 139th psalm, at the very first verses, he says, "Search me, O God, and know my heart. Try me and know my thoughts. See if there be any wicked way in me, and then lead me in the way everlasting." That's one of my favorite psalms. If you're humble and willing, I believe this, even around the Lord's table this evening. I believe God will prompt your heart about issues that need to be confessed, both in your relationship with Him and your relations with other people. So that's the first thing. Confess your sin to God and repent. Number two, seek forgiveness from those you've wronged. It's important that this comes out as, you have to think about these things. And it's important how your confession and expression comes out. And it's better to come out in a way like this. Be specific. Here's how I have sinned against you. Will you forgive me? Because what mostly happens is Something less specific like, I'm sorry if I hurt you. Well, that's a start, but it just won't do. Number 3, where necessary, make restitution for any damage you've caused. This is something that's often overlooked, and all of this is a part of the process. It isn't really appropriate to ask someone to forgive you debt that you could readily pay. Restitution is paying back in part or in full the debt that's owed or the damage that's been done. For example, if I've slandered you or gossiped about you, which often happens, I don't mean it often happens in my case, but it often happens among us, and I dare say that at times I have been guilty. Of course, I need to come to you first, but I may also have to go to others and clear up the record, admitting humbly that I have entangled them in my sin. You know, when you've spread some piece of ill-founded news or slander or gossip to a number of people, it really isn't much good going to the person who's done that. Or you've offended and said, I'm sorry I did that. But what about the half dozen other people and then the half dozen more that heard it at the end of the telephone, 30 minutes later? We would need to seek their forgiveness as well. If I've stolen anything from you, then I need to fess up, but I also need to pay you back and make sure things are straight. Remember the story of the wee little man? Zacchaeus was his name. When he came face to face with Jesus and sought to be his follower, Zacchaeus stood before the Lord and he said, Behold, Lord, I give half my goods, I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone, I'm going to pay it back 400%. Do you remember? Luke 19. And do you remember what Jesus said to him? He said, This day salvation has come to your house. Number 4, where possible, seek to restore the relationship. In Romans chapter 12 at verse 18, Paul explains it like this: If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all. Now this is tricky, because depending on the nature of the hurt, the time that's passed and the damage done and the willingness of the individual to forgive you, it may not be possible to reach a point of full restoration. And when you're in a situation like that, my advice is simply this: if you're not sure whether to re-engage the person in a relationship that you've hurt or not, then talk to someone you respect and someone you trust and get their wisdom on it. Someone you have known and you recognize as a reasonable and most especially a real Christian person who has got character and wisdom. Ask them, what should I do? And I think you'll get good guidance on that account. But then fifthly, go forward with a sense of urgency. Go forward with a sense of it. Don't say, I'll do it tomorrow. I'll kind of deal with the sacrifice first, and then after I've made the sacrifice, then I'll sort it out. Don't do that. Remember, Jesus was suggesting that before we even bother giving God a gift or even attempting to serve Him, we should make past wrongs right. We should go and clear out our conscience and then come and offer whatever it is we wish to offer, or get involved in whatever it is we wish to get involved for God in. Now, I, for one, don't pretend that the process of gaining and maintaining a clear conscience is easy. I know it's not. And there are times when I don't get sleep because I don't have a clear conscience. And over things you might think, other people might think, well, why would you be bothered about that? Well, the only reason I'm bothered about it is because God has bothered me about it. And in all likelihood, it will require courage. Being a Christian isn't for the faint-hearted. Being a Christian isn't for wimps. And it will take humility, and it'll take honesty, and goodness me, it might even take inconvenience, and perhaps even loss or sacrifice. But in my experience, as I mentioned this morning with one incident in my own life, the joy and the freedom that I experienced when I came to the person that I had told a lie to and said, look, when I said no yesterday, I should have said yes. I cannot express to you the joy in my soul knowing that I had done the right thing and the burden that dropped from my shoulders. It was almost like getting saved again. So the wonderful freedom from guilt and the joy of a clear conscience is worth it all. What is it Jesus said? You're coming with your gift, and into your mind you realize that a brother or a sister is something against you. Don't go through the hypocrisy of offering the gift. Go and sort it out with the person you've offended, and then come and offer.